Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, panelists, and thank you to our Sidwell Friends students. I so appreciate that we are starting the day focusing on how our young people can serve and how we can support our next generations to be more involved in volunteering and giving and in generosity. Listening to them, all I can say is, we're going to be okay. We're going to be just fine. My name is Kelly McFarland Stratman, and I am the Executive Director of the National Council for the Social Studies. NCSS, as we are known, engages and supports educators in strengthening and advocating for social studies. We have members in all 50 states, here in the district, of course, and Puerto Rico. NCSS serves as an umbrella organization for the many disciplines that make up social studies, including history, civics, geography, economics, political science, sociology, psychology, anthropology, and even law-related education. We provide support and resources to K-12 classroom teachers, college and university faculty, and social studies supervisors. And we advocate for our vision for our organization, which is a world in which all students are educated and inspired for lifelong inquiry and informed civic action. And we believe that that civic action includes service, and we place a high value on that important aspect of community engagement. In fact, our Honor Society for Social Studies students, Rho Kappa, not only focuses on academics, but it focuses on community service. I am so honored to be here with you today and to be on stage with this incredible group of individuals. Thank you all for being here. And we're going to talk about service in the nation's capital. I'd like to start by giving our panelists a chance to introduce themselves and their organizations. And I'm going to give you a simple question. I hope it's simple. What brings you into service, and how does it show up in your day-to-day life?
Thank you so much, first off, for having me here. I'm Shreyaa, Venkat. I am the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Nest for Us, which is the world's largest youth-founded nonprofit focused on harnessing service and kindness in order to uplift communities and spark global change. And it's a fantastic question. For me, service was never really a conscious decision that I ever made. It was always ingrained within the environment that I grew up in. I'm a second-generation Indian American, and so as I grew up, I watched my parents build their lives based on the values of community and generosity and kindness. And so, you know, as I was growing up, I got this exposure very early on to this world of community service and what that would even look like. My mom would take my sister Isha and I along with her to different school, library, community events, and even back in elementary school, having that exposure, I think, was so instrumental to so many things in my life, but I think it planted something in me that I don't think ever stopped growing, and that was a passion for service. And so as I continued going through middle school, high school, I started noticing so many different gaps in the community, right? So much food being wasted while my neighbors were going to bed hungry. Other young people just like me who didn't have the opportunity to give back like I did or just didn't know how to. And so seeing all of these issues, I wondered to myself, I was thinking, why isn't someone doing something to fix this? There's just so many issues in the world. And then I realized, wait, why couldn't that someone be me? And so 10 years ago, my sister Isha and I, Isha was 10 and I was 13, when we decided to start Nest for Us. And what started as just two sisters with a simple goal to help those in need has grown to now a team of over 9,000 volunteers of all different ages and backgrounds, giving back together and doing what they love, doing what they're passionate about. And we have 5 programs that are cross-cutting across over 14 of the UN SDGs and addressing everything from global hunger, climate change, education, leadership development, mental health, social justice, really everything in between. And it's meant to be that expansive because one of our strengths is providing opportunity pathways for people to discover what exactly they are passionate about. And over the years, I've actually realized that service isn't really what I do. It's really who I am. And I think that distinction between service as an act versus service as an identity is exactly what this moment in our nation's history is calling us towards. And it really does showcase that service is the most powerful connector that we have, and I'm proud to say that that is part of every single initiative that we have at Nest for Us.
Thank you. Cait?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cait Leavey. So for me, service started back from when I was 10. It is very deeply personal for me. I lost my dad on September 11th. He was a lieutenant in the fire department. Him himself, engaged in an active service of bringing all those men and women home to their families. And for me, specifically, right after 9/11, there was a lot of profound grief, but there was also something that was very powerful. The sense of people that were showing up for one another, the collective care, the unity, the willingness to support people you don't even know. And that really shaped me, how I understand service. I learned at a very young age what service meant to me and how I wanted to relate to it. And it's just not about what we do, it's about how we show up for each other, especially in moments when people feel the most alone. So my professional path has been shaped by 9/11 and and how service shows up for me. And so I started off my career in Teach for America, where I was an early childhood teacher in the Bay Area. And that was incredible to see how young people feel connected in their communities and how they have a sense of purpose, even at the young age of 3, 4, and 5. Now I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I predominantly serve first responder and military communities. I also am a 9/11 Day ambassador, which is how I'm here representing. And 9/11 is now the largest national day of service, and is such the organization is such an embodiment of turning grief and pain into action and unity. And 9/11 Days inspired me to create my own day of service the day after on 9/12. It's called the Spirit of 9/12, and it's a way to show specifically children and families what that sense of what 9/11 felt. I mean, we can learn about it in our history, but I think that there's something to show the next generation of what really the embodiment of 9/12. And I started a nonprofit with my good friend Josh Garcia, who is a survivor of the Pulse shooting, and we created a organization called the Holding Frames, which is an art space collective of be able to help individuals turn their experience into action. And so we gather on 9/12 kids, adults, families, and we create art pieces that are given to other communities that are experiencing their own loss or tragedy.
Thank you, thank you. Antoinette?
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Antoinette Mitchell, and I serve as the State Superintendent of Education in Washington, D.C. My title is trying to speak statehood into existence. The office that I lead supports the 100,000 students that are in public schools in Washington, D.C. We try very hard to ensure that they each get a very strong education, and the work that we do is really important to all of the families in D.C. Because education really is a cornerstone of a successful life. For me, I deeply believe that service is, I believe that individuals are actually the outcome of the communities, the families, the institutions that pour into them. And for me, DC has been absolutely wonderful. I come from a family which began in the South, migrated to DC in 1954. We're a religious family. We're a family of educators. And education and religion just means that service is something that you do. It's in your blood. And certainly service is in my blood. It was drilled into me that service is the rent we pay for being here on earth, right? As the state superintendent, I work really hard to ensure that all of the students in DC get a great education and have great experiences. As a DC Public Schools graduate, that certainly was the case for me. I also am a former DC Public Schools teacher. I raise kids in DC Public Schools. So to have the opportunity to serve as the state superintendent is really meaningful. And I can tell you that it's not just me. The entire staff, the 1,500 folks that keep the buses running to ensure that kids get to school on time and that work in curriculum and data and assessment, all of the folks that work at the office are not only really dedicated public servants, but in their private lives as well, they also volunteer. For me personally, I see my volunteer work not only the work that I do as the state superintendent, but also in my personal life. As a matter of fact, I attend, you know DC, there's almost a church on every corner. We are putting together 20,000 meals to ship to Haiti just this weekend. So that is a personal piece of service that I do. But overall, I just believe that everybody wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and service enables them to do that. And in addition to that, service really does, as the former speaker said, it really grows us as individuals and as people, helps us empathize with others in ways that make us feel better.
Thank you all for those very personal stories. I appreciate your candor and your openness with all of us. I'd like to take a minute and explore more fully what service looks like. You all touched on this, but I want to unpack it a little bit more if we can. And I'm so glad to have this lineup, and I give a special shout out to Michael at Independent Sector for putting us all together and connecting us. But each of you brings a very different perspective to this. And so, Antoinette, I'm going to start with you, and I'd like to hear more about what are some of the ways that service happens in and around Washington, D.C. In your role, I'm especially curious about how you see service as a way to ensure that students are connected to the communities and that they are prepared to go out into the world and continue on that path. I don't know if you have any particular stories of students, of educators, of families that come to mind.
Sure. Happy to take that one first. So we understand service as something that builds not only skills, but also character and connection. And to that end, I'll start with our graduate profile. We've recently developed a graduate profile, which is a collective vision of the characteristics and skills that we want to see when a student graduates from public schools in Washington, D.C. And one of the 7 characteristics is social, emotional, and physical well-being. And a part of that has to do with empathy and social connectedness. And in order to get there, in order to help students feel empathy and engage in social connectedness, we have our brand new social studies standards. And those standards include a course, an 8th grade course in civics, and that is action research and service learning personified. In addition to that, we often have town halls, and attended a town hall recently where a young person was talking about her service at a food bank. We, as was indicated earlier, have a requirement where students have to do community service as a part of graduation. And so this child's community service was at a food bank, and she talked about the empathy that she felt for families that were coming through because they were food insecure. And that gave her the courage to speak to city leaders about the fact that there are families in our communities that are food insecure. And so for me, that incident represented not only service at its best, because it's helping people understand the plight of others in our community, helping individuals connect things that happen in our society, big shifts in unemployment and things of that nature, to the real world. But it also gave her the courage to speak out, to stand up, and to be heard, and to be a voice for families that are voiceless. And so all of that is because of service in Washington, D.C. I will also say that just broadly, there is a ton of service going on in the city, and I hope to have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that in some of the other questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Shreyaa, you told us what inspired you to start Nest for Us and how incredibly it has grown over the last 10 years. Can you give us some examples of service that you all have helped to facilitate and organize through your organization?
Yes, of course. So I think when I think about service in DC, what it looks like, I actually think about contrast and the extraordinary opportunity that that contrast brings. I mean, think about it. We are in DC, where some of the world's most powerful leaders are making decisions just mere miles away from where communities are under-resourced, are food insecure, where global hunger policy is debated just the street next to where someone is going to bed hungry. These are issues that we just cannot look away from anymore, and these are really things that we have to act on. And at Nest for Us, which was actually created right next door in Northern Virginia, we've seen this manifest in so many different ways within our volunteers. And over the past decade, we have seen and discovered how when you bring people together and you give them the opportunity pathways in order to not only do service, but discover what they're passionate about and then serve on top of that, they don't just help, they're building movements. And so I wanted to create a space where service wasn't transactional or performative, but was fun and relatable, where a giver, receiver, or honestly both, felt seen and valued. And I think that's really been one of the biggest strengths of our work at Nest for Us. This has been incorporated into all of our programming. And thinking now to your question about, over the past decade, some of the most impactful moments that have taken place at Nest for Us have actually happened in this region. And one of our favorite events at Nest for Us is actually our community resource distributions, where every week we wake up bright and early, get a bunch of volunteers together, and are supporting over 250 underserved families every week with a variety of nutritious meals, everything from toiletries, books, school supplies, toys, anything a family needs, we aim to provide. But what I think makes it especially special is really the consistency, right? Families come, they expect and they're excited to get these much needed resources, but also we've gotten to make a lot of cool connections with our families. Our volunteers come. They realize that their time is genuinely valued. They get to make new friends, new connections. They learn something new every time. It's not something that they're just doing because they have to. It's because they want to. They really want to show up there. And of course, then comes to the resources. These are resources that otherwise would have been thrown away, but are instead redistributed, repurposed, so that people who are most in need in our community are able to get the help and the support that they need. And that's only one of the many opportunities that we provide at Nest for Us. We have 5 programs spanning tutoring, mentorship, leadership development workshops, internship programs. We just launched a new volunteer portal. We have all kinds of opportunities, large-scale service projects, kindness notes, the list goes on. And what that shows is that one of the most powerful things that we can do is bring together people who otherwise would have never been in the same room together, see what they do out of it, and give them a compelling reason to work together. And that is really how you're gonna naturally build community. And it's been a beautiful thing to see. In our Nest for Us volunteer family, we call them our volunteer family because they're more than just people that come and serve with us. They are members of our community, our family, and our nest. So it's very, very beautiful to have seen that manifest and really grow super, super wonderfully over the past decade.
Wow, thank you so much. Cait, you noted you wear many hats, but I'm going to ask you a specific question about your 9/11 Day work and how, at 9/11 Day, how do you build a culture of service, especially among young people? And I know Shreyaa started to talk about this a little bit, but what are the ways that young people become, but not only join you, but stay engaged in the work and in the service?
I think it starts with belonging, and so 9/11 Day offers a really powerful example of what it looks like to build a culture of service, especially for our young people. It is the largest day of service in our nation, and for the 25th anniversary, they've committed to assisting 25,000 service projects, which is incredible. I think when I think about on 9/11, how are we engaging our next generation? It's about, thinking of the legacy of 9/11 and not just as history, but that's something I think they can actively participate in. And so when I think of engaging our next generation of youth, there are so many ways, and it's just really starting right at the level of connection. The connection and belonging, of finding something that an individual can find themselves in relation to, whether that be in their, on their block, in their school, in their community. If they can find a sense of purpose and belonging, that is what I think is what is so important in engaging our youth in service. And what is really great is 9/11 Day supports all service projects. They have their large service projects in our major cities. In New York, at the Intrepid, there is a largest, it's incredible. I've gone for the past couple of years where we're packing food, and those are the large acts of service, but then there's a smaller acts of service where they're supporting K through 12 schools and campuses, and as well as youth-serving nonprofits to act in to have their own day of service or project in September. And that is something that you can look on their website, because they are committed to be giving out grants for this National Day of Service in September. And so I feel like for me, when I think of how I can set an example when I talk to, not only the kids that I used to teach, but also the people that I engage with in my work as a mental health counselor, it's really about finding their agency in service, right? And finding that sense of belonging and feeling seen and supported. And we talk about how service can really serve as a mechanism of helping individuals not feel isolated, right? And so it's really important that we lead, service through that lens of connection and belonging.
Thank you so much, Cait. Thank you for all this work. So I think these stories are also powerful. They're each inspiring in their own way. And they show sort of the wide breadth, right, and forms that service takes. And of course, the incredible impact that it has. They also show the different roles, right, that each of us, no matter where we are in our stage of life or where we live, right, we can take part in that. I'd love to dig a little bit more into the how of service, especially how we engage young people. Can you share some of the ways you would suggest for this region, or even wider, across the nation, right, that we can build a stronger culture around service, especially when we think about what do young people need, right, to become involved, to stay involved, and to really feel connected to their communities. So Cait, I know you started this line of questioning, so I'm going to jump back to you first, and then we'll move down the panel.
I believe it requires intention. So there are three things that I believe that help youth get involved, and stay engaged. Connection, meaning, and accessibility, right? Connection, making them feel like they're part of something that's a relational. Meaning, what does it mean to them? And being able to have that self-reflection back to that. And that is a sense of creating that sense of agency for them. Accessibility, I think about accessibility for our youth. There's so many different ways. I mean, as adults, we say, there's so many ways you could serve and give back. Be an example for our youth, right? Show them what are ways that you can engage in service in your own community. I always say that it's, it really starts from the smallest act of kindness. And I kind of going back to 9/11 and more specifically 9/12, that's what 9/12 meant. It meant just being able to lend a helping hand in the smallest ways and how meaningful those small acts of kindness really has for someone. And so I think that, you know, when we look at our youth who are so engaged in so many things these days, especially with technology, there is that sense of, you know, of setting that example for them, and helping them feel connected to something larger. And that just may mean for them to, you know, maybe from something they read about or something that they witness or they see. You know, for me specifically, I work with individuals of turning their grief and loss, you know, and their pain into action. That may not be for, you know, everyone's experience, but, you know, it's even listening to someone maybe share their own story and being inspired by their own story and taking that back, you know, to themselves. Okay, well, what can I do to assist that person, or what can I take from that story, and, you know, create a sense, you know, of action, right, through my own ways. And I think that's, you know, the way more that we're bringing youth together to think, you know, together, like what we've been talking about is really important, is getting them into a room, maybe a room that they never thought they would be in, and saying, okay, you know, what would you do in this scenario? Giving them a sense of purpose and agency.
Great.
Antoinette, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with the other things the panelists have indicated. I'll just add that I think one of the ways that we can make service a stronger part of our culture is to ensure that there are structured opportunities for people to volunteer. Our mayor, our wonderful mayor, Muriel Bowser, really supports an entire DC government agency called Serve DC. And they stand as that is a clearinghouse for volunteer opportunities for people in the city. And the thing that comes to mind most immediately is the snow team. Whenever it snows, this huge wave of volunteers comes together through Serve DC to support seniors and folks that have problems with mobility, deal with the snow. And so just having those structured opportunities available for people, I think, is important. And then in the schooling context, career and technical education is having a moment in our schools because people are believing that kids really want to be able to connect what they're learning to their futures. And so we've got like 6,000 high school students engaged in career and technical education programs across the city. And thank you for that. One of the most important components of that work is work-based learning. These are opportunities for children to understand careers outside of the school setting or in ways that are different from just being in the classroom listening to a teacher. And so we're talking about opportunities for volunteers to come into the schools as speakers, to judge contests that kids are having, to sponsor job shadowing, to provide internships for our students. This is a tremendous amount of work, and the way that we're able to do it is through advisory committees. And so at the state level, we have advisory committees for everything from banking, communications, engineering, health sciences, IT, you name it. We've got these groups of volunteers who are experts in their field who are willing to give back to kids, and the students absolutely love it. The opportunity to see people often who look like them, people from their communities, people who are doing the things that they want to do in the future, coming in. This is giving kids those experiences, I think, not only helps the child develop into the future that they want, but it also gives them this notion that, yeah, I want to come back and I want to give back to my community just like these people are giving back to me. So that's another very structured way, I think, to build it into our culture.
Wow, so powerful. Thank you. Shreyaa, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I think I'd actually take a stab at reframing the question and saying youth actually already have interest and have the inspiration to get involved. I think it's the challenge is actually building systems that support that interest. Young people are extraordinarily aware of what is happening in the world. They are frustrated, they are seeing what's happening, they are ready to go, but they really, sometimes it's hard for them to figure out exactly how to take all of that energy and channel it into something actionable. And so I think we need to start by stopping thinking about service as just an add-on or a nice to have, and think of it as what it actually is and start treating it like what it actually is, and that's the infrastructure from what community is built from. I mean, think about it. We invest in roads, we invest in schools, in hospitals, all these things that communities can't function without. Service is the same kind of infrastructure. It's people showing up for others in the community. So why don't we invest the same way in service than we do for the other types of infrastructure? And so, thank you. Thank you. And when service is woven into daily life, when it's not just a one-time action or a one-time fundraiser, it starts to manifest in ways that is hard to quantify, but it is also absolutely impossible to ignore. And that's really where you start to see community naturally come together. And I honestly can't think of a region more opportune than DC. I mean, we have such an amazing, our panelists right here are showcasing just how amazing of a conglomeration we have of mission-driven organizations. We have engaged residents. We have just all kinds of stakeholders that are interested in giving back. But what's missing? It's that connective tissue. It's how do we connect them together? How do we create more pathways for people to find their entry points into service? How do we, from the organizational side, build more on collaboration rather than competition, right? We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to make the world a better place, so why not work together to do that? And I think, bringing it back to young people specifically, I think these are the three things that matter most. As a young person who has created her own organization, these have been absolutely instrumental and haven't come easy, but have been absolutely instrumental in my journey. And those are access, trust, and belonging. So starting with access, I think it's important to meet young people where they are, whether that be in schools, on social media, spaces that they already inhabit. And that will also help with the second part of removing the barriers, right? Seeing how we can support in eradicating things like transportation barriers, time barriers. Those are more of the logistical factors, but also some of the more intangible factors, like the sense that only someone with a certain type of job or a certain type of funding or platform or some other external reason, they're the only ones with that kind of label that can make a difference, when in fact service doesn't have a label. It can really be anyone as long as they have the passion and heart to give back. And I think that ties directly with trust and the importance of, stop tokenizing young people. We don't want to be here just to check a box. We want to be here because we actually have ideas that matters. We have perspectives that matter, and we have experience that matters that need to be in these spaces with real, meaningful impact. And at Nest for Us, we see this manifest through our internship program. Our interns are in charge of real projects. We have our volunteers in charge of food rescues. They're leading the food rescues. And I think that has been absolutely instrumental, because with young people rise to the level of expectation that you set for them, right? If you set the bar high, they will meet that and exceed that. And so it's absolutely instrumental to be able to harness and nourish that leadership and development and agency from the ground up, from the get-go. And last but certainly not least, we have belonging. A lot of the times, volunteers will come, and they might come for service hours, for a resume boost, or some other external motivation, and that's fine because that's their entry point. But it's important about what happens next. Why do they decide to stay? And one of the biggest reasons for that is because they found community, right? Going back to what my panelists were sharing, they're able to find people and meet people that they've never would have thought they would ever have met before. And they finally feel, maybe for the first time in their lives, that their presence actually matters in that room. They're actually making a difference just for being there. They don't even have to do anything. Just for being there and showing up, that's making a difference right away. And so as we celebrate 250 years of America, 10 years of Nest for Us, which is so crazy to think about, I think the investment that we need to make is actually building the conditions that support these systems and make service feel like a home for anyone, regardless of where they come from or what background or what generation they are. Intergenerational action, super, super important. But also regardless of where they started from. And I think that's really what's going to set our world in the right direction.
Well, thank you all very much. I know this panel has been so great. I'm so inspired. My bucket is overflowing here. But I am getting the signal that it is time for us to wrap up. So I have one last question. We'll try to do this a little quicker here. As we close out, I'm going to ask each of you to look back and look forward. Okay, so we all know it's the big birthday year. Shreyaa just mentioned it, 250 years for the United States. We'll be reflecting throughout the day on the significance of service and our history and highlighting how it shows up today. But I'd love to conclude with all of you looking to the future. And I'm going to give you each a magic wand or some magic beans or fairy dust or something. And I'm going to ask you if you could do one or maybe two things to ensure that future generations are connected to service. What is it that you would do? And I know, Shreyaa, you started on this, so I'm going to pass it to you first, and then we'll go down the line.
That's a great question. Sometimes I really do wish I had a magic wand, some days. But I think for me, and I saw it on the panel here today, as each of us were talking about the things that we're leading, you could see the excitement and the feeling. And I think that if I had a magic wand, I would want to ensure that everyone from a young age is able to experience that feeling before they're taught what service is. Because I don't think you can teach service. I think it's something that you have to experience, that you have to feel, and you have to connect with at a deeper level than something that you read in a textbook. And so that would be definitely one of the things, one of the many things that I would do with the magic wand. Because I think right now we're trying to make people care about something that they've never actually felt. And that's very difficult. You have this internal detachment from what you're doing. And of course, it's important to be informed. We have a dual approach at Nest for Us that's awareness plus action. But you have to be able to harness that feeling. And the only way to do that is to immerse yourself directly in service. So that'd be one of my things. And then the second is from a leadership perspective. I think we need to redefine what leadership is. Oftentimes, young people will think, when you think of a leader, you think of someone who is older, who is more experienced, who has decades more of impact and experience and all that jazz than you do, but that's simply not true. Leadership is simply stepping up for and standing up for something that you believe in. And I think once we redefine that, these pathways of service and opportunity that I was talking about, I think they're going to naturally open up because more young people will see others just like them who are in these spaces. They don't have to be in leadership positions, but see them in spaces where they feel like that can be me too. And that's how you, again, build community within leadership as well. And I don't think for both of these things that we need a magic wand. I think we just need a willpower to do it. I think we just need to make that intentional, deliberate choice. These are not difficult things to do conceptually, logistically maybe, but conceptually, they're very simple to understand. So I think I'll leave it at that, but I would love to see more intergenerational action and a reimagining of what service looks like and what leadership looks like.
Excellent. Thank you. Cait?
Okay, so if I had a magic wand, I would make service something that's woven into how young people experience community from an early age. It's not something what they do occasionally, but something they see as part of who they are. So making service more connected and meaningful. And I think when I think of that, I think of the early childhood teacher in me, and how I would ask that question to myself every day when I was in the classroom. And it's simple, right? It's just showing. I think there's also something that we all have a responsibility here today is leading by example, right? Or showing our next generation, modeling that for them. Because service, just like how we talked about, it's not just about giving back. It's about creating connection. And it's about being, feeling seen, connected, and part of something bigger than themselves. And that's what we carry forward. So, I really think about, my magic wand would be is starting from that early age, and making youth feel part of something, and showing them what community is, so then they can sustain and create their own communities of change.
And I'll be really quick. When I think about the future and how we ensure others can stay connected to service, I think two things. One, we should use the schools, because everybody goes to school, right? And so schools can more intentionally link service to what is happening through requirements like we have for graduation. Right now it's 100 hours that kids have to do voluntary service. We could do things like capstone experiences. We could do things like field trips designed around service and assemblies, and even high school redesign, where the whole high school is somehow connected to service. I think also it is important that we say thank you to the millions of Americans that volunteer every day. And if we do it tangibly through ceremonies, then they would get to invite their families, the communities could come out, the communities could see and learn about the types of volunteer activities that are happening, and then therefore engage more. So I think very tangibly, if you give people the opportunity, if you create the opportunities, people will volunteer, and these are just some ways that we can do that.
Thank you all so much. If I can, I'll take a personal privilege and wave my wand for just a second and say that, not surprisingly, we at NCSS espouse inquiry-based learning. And I think it kind of is a theme that comes out. It's maybe even the precursor to some of the things that you have noted here. But it's about asking questions and being curious, right? Being curious about the world around you. Why does this happen, and what is my role in doing it? And I think that's curiosity. Sadly, we know, science tells us, right, that at an early age in elementary school, we start to lose our innate curiosity. And so how do we intentionally continue to foster that in students, in schools, outside of school, through service, through the curriculum that they, and standards that they work through in the schools? And I think that's really important. Our national conference will be coming up in Chicago in December, and our theme this year is Social Studies 365. And we have that theme intentionally because it's not about the content so much, although that's, of course, very important, those disciplines, but it's about a mindset and a way that we approach the world by asking questions and doing that every day, both in the classroom and outside of it. So I know that this panel has been asking questions forever, and they'll continue to ask questions, and most importantly, about how they can make a change. And so thank you all very much for what you have done and what you will do, and thank you for being here with us. I'd like to ask everyone to thank them. Thank you. And now I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming to the stage the John Lewis Leadership Program from Fairfax, Virginia, to share their story of service. Thank you all.